All right, get ready because today we are going deep on a phrase that might seem super simple at first glance, but trust me, there's way more to run into than than you might think.
Yeah.
And today, we're gonna kind of unlock a secret code to sounding more natural and fluent when you're speaking English.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's not your first language.
Absolutely. Phrasal verbs like this, like run into, they're really the backbone of everyday English, conversation.
For sure.
And they can be kind of a head scratcher for those who aren't native speakers because, unlike a lot of other languages, you can't always deduce their meaning from, just translating each word.
Yeah, it's true. It's like they have these hidden meanings that you kind of have to like live with the language for a while to really unlock.
They're very contextual.
They are very contextual.
Yeah.
So let's break down the different ways.
Okay.
That run into can like almost shapeshift in a conversation.
Exactly. Let's start with that classic run into moment, the unexpected meeting.
Yes. Love it.
So think about a time when you were just going about your day.
Yeah.
And bam, you bumped into an old friend at the coffee shop or something like that.
Totally.
That element of surprise and serendipity that's run into in its purest form.
It's so fun. I mean, just that one little phrase captures that feeling so perfectly.
Yeah.
It's like almost like the universe is playing connect the dots with our lives, wouldn't you say?
I love that analogy.
You're right.
It is.
It is like this weird,
and it implies
like we're all on these paths.
It implies that these encounters were meant to be, even though they seem totally random.
Yeah.
And it adds a certain casualness and warmth to your conversation too.
It does. Totally.
Instead of saying, I met my former colleague yesterday, you can say, you won't believe who I ran into yesterday.
Exactly. It has that, oh my God, you're not going to believe this kind of feel to it.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of unexpected encounters, run into can also be used to describe those moments when things don't quite go according to plan.
Yes.
Like those times when you hit a snag in a project, maybe there's like a computer glitch or the recipe you're trying turns into a total disaster.
Yeah.
Like that's run into taking on a whole new personality.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's a much more natural way to describe facing these unforeseen, hiccups.
Exactly.
We all experience in life.
We all do.
Instead of saying, I encountered problems with my homework.
Right.
I ran into some problems with my homework.
It just
rolls off the tongue.
It sounds better.
More naturally.
It does. It sounds more natural. It's less formal.
Yeah, much less formal.
Yeah. It's almost like, you're acknowledging that these obstacles just sort of popped up out of nowhere.
Yes. Like potholes in the road.
Yeah, like potholes in the road.
Exactly.
And, you weren't expecting them.
Right.
And now you've run into them.
And the beauty of this usage
is
it works in so many different situations.
It does.
You can run into traffic. You can run into delays. You can even run into creative roadblocks.
All of the above.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, so we've got serendipitous encounters.
Yes.
And
unexpected problems.
Unexpected problems covered. But there's another run into.
Right.
Meaning
it's a little bit more.
That's more literal.
Yeah, literal.
Like physically bumping into something.
That's right. Let's not forget about the classic bump into, meaning.
Yes.
Those times when you walk into a table leg in the dark?
Oh, yeah. Like in the middle of the night, you get up to get a glass of water.
Exactly.
Stub your toe.
Yeah. Or you accidentally spill your coffee on someone in a crowded cafe.
Yeah.
The worst.
We've all been there.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Just last week, I was so engrossed in a podcast, I literally ran into a lamppost.
Wow.
I know.
That's a good one.
I wasn't paying attention at all.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about this usage is the emphasis on the accidental nature of the collision. It is.
You wouldn't say, I ran into my friend if you intentionally went up to them and said, hello.
Right.
That would be a very different kind of run-in, wouldn't it?
Right. That would be more like I sought them out.
Right.
We ran into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In this case, run into implies that the context was unintended.
Yeah.
Often clumsy.
Yes.
And sometimes even a little comical.
It can be.
Yeah.
So there you have it. We've got 3 distinct shades of run into.
Hey, sure.
Shades. It's amazing how one seemingly simple phrase
can paint such different pictures depending on the context.
It's fascinating. And it's also fascinating.
Right.
The ability to use these different meanings of run into fluidly is actually one of the hallmarks of sounding like a native speaker.
Mm-hmm.
It's those subtle nuances that truly elevate your fluency and allow you to express yourself with more precision and authenticity.
It's like having a secret weapon in your language arsenal.
It really is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. And the best part is you've already started to internalize these nuances.
Yeah.
Just by listening to our conversation.
You know what? That's so true.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about it that way, but it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Just hearing you explain it
Right.
is already making me more confident.
That's the power of exposure
Right.
to the language.
Totally.
But to really solidify this, let's play a little game.
Okay, I like games.
Okay, so imagine you're writing a short story and you want to use run into in a way that captures each of these meanings.
I'm game. Hit me.
All right, so picture this. Your main character is a young musician
Okay.
who's trying to make it big in the city.
Okay.
And he's, or she is, feeling discouraged.
Yeah.
But then one day, while busking on a street corner, they run into a famous music producer who happens to be walking by.
Okay, that's definitely a run into in the sense of like a very unexpected and potentially life-changing meeting.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
It has that element of fate intervening at just the right moment.
It does.
Yeah,
very cool.
And it's a perfect example of how run into can add a touch of drama and excitement to a story.
Totally.
Now, let's move on to our second meaning.
Oh.
Imagine this same character is working tirelessly on their debut album,
Okay.
but they keep running into technical difficulties.
I can already feel the frustration building,
In the recording studio.
Yeah, like every time they take one step forward, something pushes them 2 steps back.
Exactly. And using run into in this context really highlights that unexpected nature, these challenges.
Yeah.
It wasn't poor planning or lack of skill. It was just,
Just bad luck.
bad luck or unforeseen circumstances that they ran into.
I'm loving this story.
Yeah.
How about we throw in like a literal run-in
Okay. Challenge accepted.
for good measure?
All right. So in the climax of your story,
Okay.
your character is finally about to perform their big showcase
Yes.
for a packed house.
Okay.
They're rushing backstage. Adrenaline is pumping.
Yeah.
And in their haste, they run into a stagehand
Oh, no.
carrying a stack of heavy equipment.
That's not good.
Talk about a disastrous run into.
That is a disastrous run into.
Yeah.
It's like the physical manifestation of all the anxieties and pressures
Right.
they're feeling in that moment.
Yeah. It's a moment of high tension, unexpected chaos, and potentially even, some physical comedy.
Totally.
And it all hinges on that one little phrase, run into.
Run into. Wow, I'm seeing now how like mastering these different uses of it can really add like depth and nuance to my storytelling.
Not just storytelling, but everyday conversations. The more you practice using these phrasal verbs in different contexts, the more fluent and expressive you'll become.
It's like unlocking a new level
It is.
of communication.
It really is. And the best part is that it happens organically. You don't need to memorize a bunch of rules,
Right.
Or definitions. Just by immersing yourself in the language, paying attention to how native speakers are using these phrases, you'll naturally start to incorporate them into your own speech.
It's funny because sometimes I think we overcomplicate language learning.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be about memorizing lists and studying grammar rules.
Right.
Sometimes it's just about like absorbing the rhythm and flow of the language.
You're so right.
Yeah.
And that's where the real magic happens.
Totally.
When you start to internalize the language in a way that feels natural and intuitive.
It's like learning to dance.
Yes.
At first you're counting steps, you're worrying about your technique.
Right.
But eventually you just let the music move you.
Beautiful analogy. And that's exactly the kind of fluency we want to help our listeners achieve.
Totally.
A fluency that goes beyond just knowing the rules and taps into that deeper understanding of how language works in the real world.
I love that. Well said.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into the wonderful world of run into.
Before we do, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, lay it on us.
I want everyone listening to try to use at least one of the meanings of run into
Okay.
in a conversation this week.
Okay.
And just pay attention to how it feels,
Yeah.
how people respond, how it enhances your communication.
That's a great challenge. And who knows, maybe you'll even have like a funny or memorable run-into story to share next time.
I'm looking forward to hearing them,
Me too.
because ultimately,
Yeah,
that's what language is all about.
it is.
Connecting with others, sharing experiences, expressing ourselves
Totally.
in ways that feel authentic
I love it.
and meaningful.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there,
Yes.
keep exploring, keep practicing,
Yeah,
and most importantly, keep having fun with the English language.
absolutely.
Until next time. Okay, so I was like rushing to get to this meeting, feeling all like put together,
Yeah.
in my new suit. And I confidently stride towards this revolving door, not paying much attention.
Yeah.
Bam, I slam right into the glass.
Oh, I can only imagine.
I know.
The classic revolving door mishap.
That happens.
It happens to the best of us.
And the worst part was the person I was meeting was already on the other side of the door,
Oh, no.
watching the whole thing.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's just say I did not make the most graceful first impression.
Well, at least you provided some unintentional entertainment. But, that's a perfect example of how run into, even in its most literal sense, can add a touch of humor to life's little mishaps.
Totally. It's true.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've had a good laugh, what are some other ways that we can level up our phrasal verb game?
Well, one thing that's always helped me is thinking about phrasal verbs in groups.
Okay.
So instead of just trying to memorize run into all on its own,
Yeah.
consider other phrasal verbs that start with run,
Okay.
like run away, or run up against.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
It's like creating this like family tree
Yes.
of phrasal verbs in your mind.
Exactly.
It makes them seem way less intimidating
It does.
and more manageable.
Yes, you start to see the patterns,
Yeah.
the connections,
Yeah.
and suddenly they don't seem so random and confusing anymore.
I like it.
Another thing you can do is try to use the phrasal verbs that you learn in different tenses. So instead of just saying, I ran into an old friend,
Right.
you could say, I'm going to run into her later, or I had run into her a few weeks ago.
That's a great way to like really stretch his linguistic muscles.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like get comfortable.
It's like doing variations on a theme in music.
It is. Yeah. It's like taking that core phrase and just like looking at it
Exploring
from all these different angles.
all of its different facets.
Yeah.
And speaking of exploring,
Yeah.
one of the best ways to learn phrasal verbs is to simply immerse yourself in the language.
Right.
Read books, watch movies, listen to podcasts,
All good stuff.
and pay attention to how native speakers use these phrases in everyday conversations.
It's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we just overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
We
do.
It doesn't have to be all about
Right.
memorizing lists and grammar rules.
Sometimes it's just about absorbing
Yeah.
the rhythm and flow of the language.
You're so right. And that's where the magic happens.
Yes.
It's when you internalize it in a way that feels natural
Exactly.
and intuitive.
It is.
It's like going back to the dance analogy.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about the steps anymore.
You're just letting the
You're
music
in the flow.
move you.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. And that's exactly the kind of fluency
Yeah.
we want to help our listeners achieve.
Totally.
A fluency that goes beyond just knowing the rules.
Uh-huh.
It taps into that deeper understanding of how language works in the real world.
I love it. Well said.
Thank you.
All right. And on that note,
Yes.
I think it's time for us to wrap up
Okay.
this deep dive into the wonderful world of run into.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to all of our listeners out there for tuning in.
Yes.
Keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep having fun with the English language.
Absolutely.
Until next time.